Linehan, principal of middle school, high school. I appreciate everybody coming tonight virtually. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Scott DeBellis, our assistant principal, who worked so hard in putting this together in conjunction with Cara Santucci. So, Mr. DeBellis.
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend this evening. This is a topic that is very important. It's one that we take very seriously at both the middle school, high school, as well as at Cottle. I'd like to just take a quick moment to introduce our panelists. So we have Cara Santucci from Student Assistance Services, who will be facilitating our webinar this evening. Dr. Linehan just introduced himself. We also have Mr. Pete Kilgallen, who is the assistant principal at William E. Cottle. We also have Mr. Chris Keogh and Mr. Lewis Cooper in the background who are here. Thank you very much for your support with all the technical aspects of the webinar. So we are going to cover a number of different topics within the topic of bullying. Just to give everyone a little bit of a background, Ms. Cara Santucci facilitated a great professional development for the administration of our entire district, as well as all of the faculty and staff at the middle school and high school earlier this year. And we thought the next step would be to open it up to families and to our school community. Some of the topics that she's going to speak about are the different types of bullying, what are the impacts of both the person who is being bullied as well as the person doing the bullying, and some strategies that you will be able to use and incorporate. And then finally, she will provide some resources for Student Assistance Services and ways that you can contact or reach out to her. This is being recorded and we will post it on our district website. And then we will also have some additional resources that we will post along with that. If you have a question, please feel free to type it into the chat. We will leave about 15 minutes at the end of the webinar to try to have a Q&A. So again, you don't have to wait until the end, but if you do have a question, feel free to type it into the chat for us. All right, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Cara Santucci. Thank you, Cara.
Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. And I'm so happy to be spending my Wednesday evening with you all. And I would just like to start out by saying how impressed I am with the administrators at Tuckahoe, because they've put so much planning into this event. And it's great to partner with the school district that puts the students first. So first of all, I want to tell everyone, I want to thank everyone for being here and give yourself all a pat on the back, because parents really matter. In addition to being a mental health professional, I am also a parent who has raised 3 daughters. My husband and I have raised 3 daughters here in Westchester County, went to Westchester County Public Schools, and I know how hard parenting can be. I think it's a lifelong job. So I'm going to just start talking a little bit about this question comes up a lot in my field. Has there been a rise in bullying or cyberbullying since COVID? And it's a pretty good place to start because we are coming out of this transformative pandemic. And you would think the fact that kids were on Zoom for a year and a half or however long, that there could have been a rise in cyberbullying. But here's what we know. We don't have enough data to say, was there a rise in bullying during the pandemic? But we do have enough data to say that students' mental health, some students, not all students, some students' mental health was adversely affected just because even like adults, we felt isolated. We weren't seeing our friends. We didn't have face-to-face contact. But what we also know is that there was an increase in what we call bias-based bullying during the pandemic. For example, a 2020 Act to Change survey showed that over 80%, and this is not just students, this is 80% of students and adults, 80% of Asian Americans received some type of threatening, either whether it's cyberbullying or offline. They received some type of uncomfortable, unwelcomed message having to do with COVID. So we have to be very careful when we talk about bias-based bullying, because it's on a personal characteristic. So it could be on somebody's ethnicity, their religion, their gender identity. And it stings even more than regular bullying, because think about it, you can't change your identity. So if someone's making a mean comment about that, that really can get to the core of you. So because we are in a partnership with the school, I thought it would be fun for the parents to kind of just, and no one's going to be grading you, no worries. So you can just kind of do this on your own. True or false, psychological distress varies by the type of bullying. You can write down your answer. Here's the second one. It takes a number of friends to reduce the distress experienced from bullying. Psychological problems occur because targets of bullying blame the perpetrators for their problems. True or false? All three happen to be false, and I'll just spend a moment explaining it. It's not that the psychological distress varies by the type of the bullying, it's the context behind it. And what that, I mean it, simple way to explain that is, think about if I were to say something to a 9-year-old that may be upsetting to a 9-year-old. To a 14-year-old, it may not be upsetting. So it's not that the type of bullying, it's the context of that it was said. So that happens to be false. And psychological distress from all types of bullying really can be on a continuum from moderate to severe, depending on the context. It takes a number of friends to reduce the distress experienced from bullying. No, it does not. All it does is it takes one peer. There's something called social connectivity. And there has been so much national research about that if students have one peer and one adult that they are connected to at home and at school, their rates for success go up significantly. So even though kids will say, well, I don't have a lot of friends, focus on, do you have one friend? Do you have one person who you can count on? The last one, psychological problems occur because targets of bullying blame the perpetrators for their problems. This is also false, because the problems start to happen when the kids start to blame themselves. So think about that. There's a quote that I often refer to, and it says, the voices that I hear outside my head become the voices that I hear in my head. So if somebody is continually saying mean things to you, you might begin to believe them. So it's not that they're blaming the person who is causing the bullying, they end up blaming themselves because they internalize those feelings. So what is bullying? What I find so interesting, I've been doing this work since probably about 2010. And I think about that it wasn't until 2014 or 2016 that the CDC actually came up with a uniform definition of bullying. And it wasn't until 2017 or 18 that all 50 states had legislation, educational law about bullying prevention. So, bullying can mean a lot of different things to different people, which is why it's good to have a common language. So bullying is a repetitive negative actions. Now people will say, but Kara, if it happens one time, can it be bullying? Of course it can be, but it is more likely to be repetitive. The intent is to hurt, it's to harm, it's not conflict, which we will talk about, and it involves an imbalance of power. Now this is, an imbalance of power can mean a lot of different things. You could have size, like my silly cartoon, a larger student, a smaller student. An imbalance of power can be an ability level, a student who has a harder time defending themselves because they may have a differing ability, a physical ability, or cognitive. It could be social capital, that there are different groups in the school and there's an imbalance of power. So an imbalance of power can look like a couple of different things, and the unequal level of affect. That this is not teasing. This isn't two kids going back and forth like, oh, my team is better than your team. The unequal level of affect means that clearly one person is getting enjoyment out of this, the aggressor, and one person is not. And we can usually read that with social cues. And cyberbullying, the definition of cyberbullying really isn't that different from bullying. Cyberbullying is just using electronic technology to do so. What's interesting about cyberbullying is often it is something that started offline and then goes online. And think of it up this way. We all know that it's the reason why cyberbullying, you don't have to look at someone, so it's easier. It's much easier for me to type on my keyboard and press send than to go up to somebody. However, what we do see is that students who have a harder time, who may be targeted offline, may go online to retaliate. But not every mean behavior that happens online is cyberbullying. A lot of it is back and forth. And when we talk about the different forms of bullying, verbal, physical, relational aggression, and verbal happens to be the most common one. And it is also probably the hardest one for adults because we don't always see it. It may not be done in front of adults. Obviously, whenever we see parents, educators, whenever we see two kids who are in some kind of physical altercation, we don't stop to hesitate whether it's bullying or a fight or conflict. We look to break it up. So that's easy to identify. And then relational aggression is when we use relationships, whether it's gossip, to exclude, to exercise power over somebody. So the impact of bullying and cyberbullying, none of it's great. We know that. Anything that's on here is not going to be a positive outcome. However, I do want to spend some time talking about the last bullet about suicide. Often we hear in the media, oh, a student died by suicide. That student was bullied. And as adults, as educators, as parents, as members of our school community, we do not want to perpetuate that because, first of all, it's not true. Second of all, it's not true, meaning that bullying causes suicide. Bullying can be an increased risk factor for suicide, but suicide is very complex. What we do find out, and we find this out in many of these media cases, that when we look into it, the student had underlying mental health issues as well. So the reason why I spend time on this is because I've been in the field of counseling and education since the mid-1990s, and I'm passionate about what I do. And by no means do I ever want to present to youngsters that suicide is an option. There is always somebody who will listen. There is always somebody who will care. So when we talk about that relationship, the CDC actually came out with that the behaviors can be closely related, but there is not a direct correlation because we know that. So the line that we can all take, the takeaway from this is when you hear like, oh my gosh, well, I'm so nervous, bullying causes suicide. Here's what we know. The majority of youth who are bullied do not commit suicide. And that's the statement that I believe as a responsible adult that we have a responsibility to get that out there. So we do know also that there are youth who are at a higher risk of being bullied. And again, this is where that power imbalance. So it could be because of a disability. It could be because of size. And this is an interesting one. This is not just in New York State, but nationwide from grades 3 through 12, kids self-report. So on any type of survey, kids will say that the number one reason that they are picked on has to do with size. And it's not just necessarily a large body frame. It could be kids who are super tall and super thin. It could be kids who happen to be, not so tall, very small. So that happens to be the number one. And then, of course, sexual orientation, gender identity. We talked about bias-based bullying a little bit in the beginning, whether it has to do with immigration status, racism, religious affiliation. We do know, and student assistance services, for those of you who don't know, we have been around since 1985, and we do a lot of substance use prevention counseling in schools. So the reason why we actually give you some background, why we started this brand new initiative, which we just launched in June of 2022. So we're not even a year old, and we are the first, I'm so proud of this. We are the first center in Westchester County to offer direct solutions to parents, educators, and students based on bullying dynamics. And we did that. We wanted to open the center because we know the link between bullying and substance use. We know the link between bullying and depression. So the link between substance use and bullying, and it makes perfect sense because kids who are in pain are more likely to self-medicate. That doesn't mean that all kids who have been targets of bullying will self-medicate. Again, more likely to. So, and these statistics are from 2019. So these are right before the pandemic. And we know the research connection between bullying and depression. Again, that feeling of hopelessness and that feeling of a loss of control. I'll talk a little bit about this later, that bullying really is a loss experience for kids. It's a loss of self-control, a loss of self-esteem. I talked a little bit about bias-based bullying before, that when children are bullied on some aspect of their social identity that they cannot change. Okay, so we have concerns about children who bully. And you'll notice I kind of dance with my language a little bit, meaning that I don't like to label a student a bully. I'd rather say a student who exhibits bullying behavior, because kids will make mistakes. And as adults, we kind of have to expect them to make mistakes because we want them to make those mistakes when we're there to help guide them and to help them with that. So why do we have concerns about children who exhibit bullying behavior? They're more likely to have poor outcomes in life. There's something called the adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs, and bullying is considered an adverse childhood experience. So kids who exhibit bullying behavior are more likely to report poor academic achievement. They're more likely to self-medicate. Warning signs. What I love about the slide is that if I were here tonight presenting to you just on how to handle adolescent depression, how parents can help, if I were here talking about what are the warning signs to look for if there is any kind of sudden change in the family, mom or dad lost their job, grandma or grandpa is very sick. Warning signs are changes in behavior. So these warning signs that a child is being bullied are very similar to other warning signs. So my takeaway here is pay attention to change in behavior when you do see changes in eating habits, when you see a sudden loss of friends, declining grades. Those are all can be all warning signs. That does not mean that it has to be warning signs that the child is being bullied, but there obviously is something going on. Warning signs a child is exhibiting bullying behavior. Again, that they are increasingly aggressive. And what I like especially here is don't accept responsibility for their actions. We know this as parents, that like, think about if you are a parent of, you have 2 or 3 kids or however many children you have, you see that your kids, siblings squabble. That's what they do. But eventually our goal as a parent is to get kids to accept responsibility. What I said to my brother was wrong. It was hurtful. When we have kids who it's really hard to move them along that continuum, that is a warning sign. And a word about bystanders. Again, national research shows that peers are present in over 85% of bullying episodes. But here's where the big disconnect is, that we know, and we also know from national research, that the majority of peers who witness bullying feel awful and they want to help, but they don't know what to do. So what I worry about is when kids who witness bullying, I don't want them to have diminished empathy. I worry that if they see it and they don't see anyone responding to it, they say, well, I guess that's just the way it's done around here. And then it becomes normalized. So as adults, as parents, as educators, what I do when I work with parents, when I work with educators, I talk about training those bystanders to do what we call low risk behaviors. Not every kid, we're always telling our kids to do the right thing. Like I said, I'm a mom of 3. I say it all the time, but it can be scary to do the right thing. I want you all to think back to your 15-year-old self. Were you the type of kid that in the middle of a lunchroom, if someone was being picked on, could you have gotten up and between 2 people and said, hey, stop that, that's not nice, or leave him alone? I know I couldn't, but I do know that I felt really bad about it and I wanted to do something. And I wish there had been an adult who had told me that there was some things that I could do. For example, what are some of those low risk behaviors? If you tell your kids that if they witness bullying, wait till the situation clears, go up afterwards to that kid and say, I saw what happened to you and that's wrong. You don't deserve to be treated that way. Or, hey, you know what? I've spoken to Mr. DeBellis about several things and he can be really helpful. Let's go talk to him. Or, you know what? Tomorrow, just eat lunch with me and my friends. Don't worry about it. Just sit at my table. All those things are very low risk behaviors that we can coach kids and teach them how to do, and they're very helpful. Reasons why teens are reluctant to acknowledge being bullied. The older kids get in elementary school, I'm not sure how many elementary parents are on with us tonight. It's easier for kids to say, oh, I've been bullied. But as kids get older in middle school and high school, they don't want to appear weak. They may say like, oh yeah, well, it's just like a lot of back and forth, or it's drama. So we have to be careful of the words we use. Sometimes kids, they fear retaliation. They don't know how to talk about it. And they don't think anything can be done. And they don't also want to be known as a snitch. And here's another way how parents can support kids. From the time your kids are young, work with them, talk to them about the difference between reporting and tattling. And it's really clear. When we report something to keep people safe. So think about this, and I always talk to students about this, that in the United States, and I can't remember the exact year, it was like it might have been like 2016, 2017. There was something like 18 school shootings that did not happen. They were thwarted. You know why they did not happen? Because kids, adolescents told somebody, they heard about it, they reported to keep people safe. That's not tattling. Tattling is, oh, look, Kara spilled her milk, she spilled her crayons, or tattling is to get someone kind of like in trouble over nothing. Reporting is to keep people safe. And it's a very big distinction to work with your kids. Okay, so the difference between conflict and bullying. Conflict is normal. I have news for you. And conflict is necessary for our kids. And as an adult and as a parent, I don't like to witness my kids in conflict. It makes me uncomfortable, but I have learned that I need to take a step back because there is a true difference between conflict and bullying. Conflict can be painful, but conflict can also teach us that we have a right to express our differences. And the difference in conflict is that you can have conflict, it's between people who are in a relationship. So kids who are in a friendship can get into conflict. Bullying, there really isn't a true relationship there because it's that imbalance of power and control. And also with conflict is often spontaneous, like an argument breaks up. You're debating something or 2 people are talking and they say, well, I totally disagree with you. And I think your idea is stupid and I don't like your point of view. And maybe they get carried away, but the intent to harm is not there in conflict. That's the biggest difference. The intent to harm in conflict is not there. And in conflict, kids will feel remorse. They may come home and say, I had a disagreement with my best friend today. And I didn't mean it, but I called him a jerk because I just got so mad. I feel bad about that. That's conflict. Bullying, I don't care if I called you a jerk because I don't care. There's no remorse, and there's not an effort to solve the problem. And with conflict, there is. So how do we help kids with conflict? Rosalind Wiseman, who's a best-selling author, she's got a great podcast. You can look her up, and I love some of her books. And she has this method called the SEAL method to help kids with conflict. So if your child comes home and tells you that they had a disagreement, they were in conflict with a friend, think about these steps. Stop. And when I say stop, I mean listen. And this is really hard for us to do. And now I'm speaking to you as a parent, not as a mental health professional, because I know when my 3 kids come to me with their problems, my first inclination is, I want to solve this. How can I help them? And I've also learned that I have to stop. I have to take a step back, and I really have to listen. A lot of the times when our kids come to us with their problems, they're not looking for us to solve it. They're just looking to be heard. So it's kind of like that stop, look, and listen. Stop, look, and listen. Let them explain, ask some questions. Say, Kara, can you explain what your role was in this? Or explain to me what happened. How did this happen? Affirm and acknowledge. What do you think you did wrong? What do you think the other person did wrong? Acknowledge your part in it. What do you want to happen? That's such an empowering question that we can ask kids. What would you like to happen next? And then let them know that they can lock in, meaning they can go and keep in the friendship, or they can lock out. See, here's where this is what I do call the gray area, because especially in middle school, you will have a time where kids it may not be bullying, but let's just say the friendship group changes. They decide that, I've done different activities. I've moved on. I don't have that much in common with this person from elementary school. And that can be a really painful experience. I've seen it happen with all 3 of my kids. And what the parents' role in there is to try to reaffirm and let them know that sometimes friendships end, and sometimes you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people have different interests, they mature. And if someone stops being friends with you, as long as they are not exhibiting that relational aggression, and by that I mean, like if I were to walk into a lunchroom and I were to sit down and the other 5 girls got up, that's relational aggression. That's not the way to get out of a friendship. So, talk to your children about this. Talk to your children about that. You do not have to be friends with everyone, but you do have to treat people with respect, and make it part of kind of like your family statement. Like, in this family, we believe that we treat everyone with respect. And because that's really what it comes down to. And then there's drama. And drama is different from conflict, and drama is different from bullying. And as a mom of 3 adolescent girls, I have been on the drama train since kindergarten, and I'm still on it, and they're in college. So drama tends to be magnified in public networks, meaning that it could be on social media. Drama is social and it's interpersonal, and drama is also reciprocal, meaning that it's back and forth. And here's the big difference between drama and bullying. Now, I can choose to disengage from bullying, meaning that if someone is sending me mean texts, I can block them. But if it's true bullying, they're still going to come after. Drama, they're not going to, because it's reciprocal. It's that back and forth. Think of drama as those middle school texts that one of my daughters used to get at 11 o'clock at night, which is when I made the decision that phones were not staying in the room. What are you wearing tomorrow? Well, I'm wearing this color. So drama can go back and forth. And those are the differences, and they're significant. And then I always like to spend time talking about what I call toxic language. And this is the majority, in my opinion, in doing this work, in my opinion, in doing a lot of reading and going to a lot of conferences, that the toxic language is the gateway to bullying, meaning that it is not necessarily bullying. But I walk into middle schools and high schools all over the county, and I'm so glad to be back in person in many schools. And I hear things like, oh, that's, that shirt's so gay, or you throw like a girl. So all words hurt the same. And what I think of our role as parents is when we hear it, respond to it. Respond to it out of school. If you coach your child's team, or if you are a scout parent, or you're signing up to chaperone a school dance, you know, when you hear it, respond to it. And I mean, again, my three girls could cringe. But there have been times when I was carpooling with a bunch of kids in the back of my car, and I heard some kind of not nice language, and I would just, instead of berating or shaming, I would just say, you do realize I'm in the front of the car and I can hear. So since I can hear, I'm curious about why you chose that word. And I do it that way because instead of saying, that's really mean, don't use that word, because that kind of shuts down the conversation, I want to keep the conversation going. I'm going to show you a very quick video of what exactly toxic language feels like to kids.
Oh, you're so pretty for a black girl. Oh, she has a jewel nose. Oh, your hair would look so good if it was straight. Jews are so cheap. Why are you so cheap?
Do you speak good English?
How are you an Iraqi Jew?
I think the person saying microaggression kind of doesn't really think about it.
This person who said it was my friend, and like I was astonished they would like say something like that.
You don't want to make a big deal about it. But then it's also like, you just said something that offended me, so I feel like I should speak up.
Because they're micro, because they're very subtle, they're small, you feel like you don't have a reason to be upset. You're overreacting, and people even can make you feel that way when you bring it up. They're like, oh, you can't take a joke.
You're making too big of a deal of this. Why are you overreacting?
Don't take it so seriously. It was just a joke. Chill out. Say like, oh no, I actually love Black people. I love people of color. Like they try to just minimize the situation.
If someone feels hurt by a microaggression, it shouldn't just be pushed to the side.
It definitely has negative impacts. Gives people disliking who they actually are. Those kinds of subtle offensive comments can build up over time, and they can have like a deep psychological effect, and you know they can make you feel bad, and they can make you doubt yourself.
We try to just use jokes to like make things less awkward or like ease social experiences. But it is important because you need to like be aware of what you're saying and like who you're speaking to.
Think of what you say and how it can affect the person you're saying it to.
Yeah. So, again, how to respond? What, interrupted right away, like, or, you know, when they're done speaking, I'm surprised you chose those words. Those words are hurtful. Or what do you mean by that? I always like to give kids an out instead of saying, you know, that's unacceptable, which isn't the worst thing. You could, of course, say that because it is unacceptable, but I want to find out what they're thinking. So I would say, you know, I did overhear what you said, and I was surprised by it. Could you tell me a little bit more about what you were trying to say? And then a lot of times kids will say, well, I really didn't mean it. I was just, you know, joking around, and just be like, okay, I understand you didn't mean it, but the word can be very hurtful. Do you know the history of the word? And then, you know, thanks for hearing me out. Next time, I hope you'll choose a word that doesn't make people feel bad. This can be very tedious, but I'm telling you, this is where, this is called like that word that was on the screen before, microaggressions. This is where you start to see micro change when you respond to behavior like this. Okay, so think back. Remember when, and for some of you elementary parents, maybe you're there right now. Think back to teaching your child when you were learn to ride a bicycle. Remember that? You run along aside them, you hold on, and you finally take off, and they take off. I want you to use that analogy and compare it to social media usage. So my point being that there seems, you know, at the end of elementary school, beginning of middle school, many kids get iPhones, or they're Androids or Samsungs or whatever, Google phones, but they get a loaded smartphone. And when our children first learned to ride a bicycle, we didn't send them out on a major road. We probably took them to a park or a parking lot because of safety. So it's the same thing with the safety with a smartphone. And we'll go a little bit more into expectations. So think about it. Children are great imitators, so give them something great to imitate. And this is not always easy. My husband and I battle with this too, because we both work, we come home. Technology is great, but technology can also be a burden and a curse with work emails. Sometimes I'll go to, my girls are now all in college, but I'm thinking back even to last year to going to watch volleyball games and looking around and seeing a bunch of adults like on their phones. So we have to really be careful about role modeling. And the same way, like with teaching them how to ride a bike. And then when you fast forward from the bicycle to the next mode of transportation, think about if your child is 16, 17, they just started driving, it's very unlikely that you would say to them, oh, you just passed your road test. Why don't you, here's the keys, go into Soho this weekend. They're having this amazing street fair. Not likely that many parents would do that. So therefore, when we give our kids their phones, set expectations the same way that you would set clear expectations about driving the car, about safety on a bicycle. So here are some guidelines for social media usage. For kids who are under 8, for any of the elementary parents who are on, always bookmark those sites. There are some great educational sites out there. Bookmark them. Begin a dialogue about safety. We have done as parents such a marvelous job. We've done it from, our pediatricians help us from the time kids are young. We tell kids to safeguard their body. We talk about their private parts, that anything that can be covered by a bathing suit. Yet we need to do a better job talking to kids about safety with their virtual self, about giving out information. So just keep those open conversations going. Suggested guidelines for kids 8 through 12. Use every teachable moment. Continue to bookmark those sites. Again, talk about the dangers of giving out personal information, and keep that computer in a shared space. The family computer could maybe be in the kitchen or the den. And no computers in bedrooms at night, whatever you feel. Again, these are just suggestions, whatever you feel is right for your family. And continue with those guidelines, consistent limits, and it'll be different for every family. Consider forming a contract or a conversation, like what you want your expectations to be, and say that, yes, with this phone comes a lot of responsibility. Let them know 11 to 14, if they start to get social media accounts, that you need to have their password. And think of it this way, and this is the way that I explained it to my kids, that if I were to go on to TikTok or Snapchat, Instagram, Be Real, the recommended user age is 13. And that's by the people who designed the apps. So that's one thing I always told my kids. The other thing I said is that you have an online life. Now you also have an offline life. And as your parent, I'm part of your offline life, meaning I go to your parent-teacher conferences. I attend your sporting events, your school concerts. I take you to the pediatrician for well visits, because that's all about me guiding you in parenting. So your online life is part of your life. And as your parent, I need to be part of that as well. And it's not so much, and let them know, it's not that I don't trust you. It's just that this is all new, and we're going to do it together. Some families like to use filters and software, but that can't be your sole source of supervision. It's really about having an open and honest conversation. And as kids get older, obviously in high school, review that personal communication if the child is online late at night. Award that good decision making, and begin to shift that responsibility. So have a conversation with your child. This is something that was from a great blog that I had read. The URL is down there. Do not use this technology to lie, fool, deceive another. Don't involve yourself in conversations that are hurtful to others. Always tell your kids, you have a choice. You have a choice. If you receive gossip or a rumor about someone, you have a choice. You do not have to pass it on, nor should you. And again, don't email, text, or say anything through this device that you wouldn't say in person. So let's get on to, we're going to shift a little bit for the last couple of minutes and talk about what are some helpful things that we can do to help our kids. So when I look at all these comments, they have something in common. And these are responses that parents have said to their to kids. Just say you're sorry and move on. I'm sure he was only joking. Just ignore it. Don't worry. I will handle it. Now, these responses are very well intentioned. However, they're not validating where your child's at. So we have to be careful of how we respond. So I'm a big believer, because you never know what your kid's going to come up to you with. So I'm a big believer in having kind of prepared responses. Okay, this is a video about saying you're sorry, and I will get back to it if I have time, but it's not, I want to go to more importantly to this. How to best respond if your child is being bullied. Try not to overreact, remain as calm as possible. You know that filter, like you may get so angry in your mind because it's your baby, and we're all that mama, papa bear. And if someone's hurting your child, you tend to get angry, but your child needs to see you as someone who's calm and who's in control and grounded. Get a complete sense of the picture. Ask those questions, and I'm going to go on to some really great questions that you can ask them. Keep them involved in the situation, because as I said before, that bullying is a loss of control. So if your child says to you, but I don't want you to call the school, I'm afraid it's going to get worse, can say, I love you too much for this to go on, and no one deserves to treat you this way. And I know that the school will help us. And I have faith in the people at school. And then you could also let them know that when I speak to school, I'm going to make sure that they say, please don't use my child's name. Schools are amazing in how they investigate and how they look at cases of bullying. And they'll use words like, it was reported to us by other staff and students. So this way the child's name is not given out. Build a partnership, role play with your kid. Would you feel safe saying this? Have you tried that? How to best respond if your child is being cyberbullied? Encourage them to take a break. Save all evidence. You can block communications. If you just Google in the Google bar, how to report bullying incident to Snapchat. That's all you have to do. It will come up. And at the end of my presentation, I'm going to show you where you can get parent guides to all different types of social media. So bullying is that loss experience. That's a loss of control, loss of belongings, loss of self-esteem. So we need to construct that productive dialogue with your child's school. Let the school know that you need their help. Say, how can we partner together to best serve my child? Begin with your child's teacher, guidance counselor. Start with the chain of command and keep your child, empower them, keep them involved. Let them know, say, I'm going to be calling your teacher. Would you be able to write down what this experience has been like? Because I want to make sure that they know how hard this has been for you. This is something that I find really helpful with parenting. It's called a social discipline window. Think about this. People, so say kids, are generally happier and more cooperative when people in authority, parents, do things with them rather than to them or for them, meaning that keep them engaged in the process. When we are just punitive and punish, and if your kid made a mistake, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a punitive consequence, but with that punitive consequence, what will you do next time? What will be different? How to best respond if your child is the one who's exhibiting bullying behavior. We are all perfectly flawed. I had a point in my parenting career in 5th grade where it was my daughter who was the aggressor, and I wanted to run under a table and hide. It was very, very, and I'm like, oh my gosh, people in my community know what I do. But it was about accountability, and it was about really my husband and I sitting down with her and finding out why she was motivated to do that behavior. My first instinct was to take her to the person's house and make her apologize. I'm glad I did not follow through with that instinct because it was too soon for that apology to come. She needed to do some work and get some accountability and realize why her words were so hurtful. So I did not force her to apologize. And then even after the incident was resolved at school, and I asked the principal, I said, would you find out if I could contact the parent? And the parent said yes. And then after everything was resolved, I called the parent and said, would your child be willing to receive an apology letter from my child? And that parent said, yes, I think that would be meaningful. If that parent had said no, I would have had to respect that and say, okay, it's out there. I wanted to let you know. My letters moved around. Again, I went over this before, low risk behaviors about what kids can do. They're making sure you're all awake, listening to my little drum beat. You tell your kids, let them know that they have the power to make a difference in everyone's life just by that act of kindness. Reward them. You know, when you find out, if you're waiting in the pickup line and you happen to see that someone dropped their books and it was your kid who bent down and helped them pick them up. Oh that was amazing. That was so nice. I saw some other kids started to laugh at him and you were the one that bent down and helped. You know, all the little things. There's that book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. I'm telling you to sweat the small stuff. Again, these are 3 questions you can work with your child about intervening as a bystander. Is it safe to intervene? Does the situation require adult assistance? Does it need an immediate response? 3 ways to support the target. Again, low risk. What do you need? How can I help you? The number 1, acknowledge that it happened. Oh, I saw that and I'm so sorry that happened. You know, the majority of kids at Tuckahoe really are really nice. I'm sorry that kid said that. Okay, this is great national research, and I'm just going to quickly, these are the least helpful. So this is what we don't want to do. The least helpful adult strategies. Told me to stop tattling, told me to work it out on my own, told me that if I acted differently, this wouldn't happen, or told me to ignore it. And this is from national research from over 13,000 middle school and high school kids. How would you like your parents to respond if you told them about a bullying situation? Be calm, don't overact, don't yell, don't freak out, support me, just listen. Remember what I said, a lot of the times they want just to be heard. Don't call the school without telling me or asking me if that is what I want. Help me assess. So helpful questions. This question right here is great because you're not asking them, have you been bullied? You're asking them, what are your experiences with bullying? And they may say, well, what do you mean by that, Mom? What do you mean by that, Dad? Well, I was just wondering, have you seen it? How does it make you feel? What would you like to see? You know, all these types of questions, and you will have copies of my slides. So you will have these for later on. This was something that was on my refrigerator for a very long time. It was just something, and if you email me, I can send it to you and you can put it on yours. I'm a big believer in visual cues. And again, this was just part of the fabric of our family. Think before you post. And I kept that communication open. And I'm telling you that I made plenty of mistakes along the way, but I never stopped trying. Very important, talk to your kids about the difference between real friends and virtual friends. I love this. I have a handful of flesh and blood friends and a couple of thousand of virtual friends. My social media strategy is very simple. Try hard, even on the bottomless, loneliest days, not to confuse the two. The Dignity for All Students Act is New York State's anti-bullying legislation, and it covers all protective characteristics. And here we are. This is where I work at the Student Assistance, the Adolescent Counseling and Bullying Prevention Center. We have a helpline that is staffed 5 days a week. So we're not a 24/7 hotline, we're a warm line. You'll have this information as well, our website, our phone number. Again, help is a phone call away. And this right here, these are parental guides for Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram, Twitter. So, and again, if you were just to put in the Google, if the Google bar, Parents Guide to Be Real, Parents Guide to Snapchat, it will come up. And I educated myself on this years and years ago, even before I had my previous job, because my kids were finding out about it. It can be intimidating, but it's so important to, and they actually do make like social media for dummies, those books. So this is just, I love this poem because people always, I mean, not to date myself with my age, but when I grew up, kids always said, oh, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never harm me. And it's actually the reverse, that it's the names that people remember. So I am here to answer questions. I got through it. I'm going to take a sip.
First of all, Karen, before I let you take a breather for a second, I want to say thank you. This is not my first time of watching and listening to the information, and I think every time I listen to it, I'm picking things out as well, not only as an administrator but also as a parent. So thank you. You presented it in a very comprehensive way, and I think a very realistic way, and I think that's something that is a huge asset to us. So again, you've done it with the administration, you've done it with the staff and faculty, and that's why we thought it was important, to present it to the school community. So thank you. Again, I thought you did a great job, and I think the information that you have in there is fantastic. So
Ditto. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I'm gonna try to monitor the chat now, and try to see. I know you had answered this one already, but yes, we will have the slides and we will have resources available, including your contact information. And that was, you and I had the opportunity to work for probably a month, maybe a little bit more, preparing for this. So, I can attest to all of the passion and the hard work that you put into this. And obviously this is tailored towards our audience, and I know your company does even more than that. So please, by all means, parents, community members, if there's a question or something, that you want to reach out, please do so, because Kara will definitely take the time to sit and speak with you. And then also, if necessary or possible, she'll try to create a bridge between the school, or even, just provide advice about how to work as a partner with the school, which I think is critical. So we got to thank you for a very thoughtful presentation. The clarification of conflict, bullying, and drama was excellent. That was one, I think, of the main takeaways that we had, as staff, as administrators as well, because a lot of times that term is used as a blanket. And I think that, having a definition of those is critical. So I agree with that. Thank you for noticing the difference between bullying, behavior, drama, and conflict. I think as parents, we tend to think conflict and drama is all considered bullying. Excellent point. And it isn't. That was the last part of that in the chat. So the next question is, well, first of all, thank you for the webinar. Can you elaborate when it's just teasing and when it leads to bullying?
Yes, great question. So I'm a firm believer that every behavior deserves a response. So if it is just, and teasing can be painful. I mean, names really do, words matter. So names hurt. So if it is just teasing, if your child comes home, and again, age appropriate. So I don't know the context, the developmental context matters. So let's say that it is, I know, like a 6th grader, 7th grader, and your child comes home and says, he just constantly teases me about teases me that I'm short, and it just bothers me. It's not like, but I don't, it's not like he's doing it so meanly, but it still bothers me. So, work with your child, role play. What would you like to happen? And the chances are then that answer is going to be, well, I want it to stop, Mom. I want it to stop, Dad. Okay. So have you asked him, or the real question is, would you feel comfortable saying, when you call me short, I don't like that. And if your child says, no, I just am kind of afraid to do that. I'm afraid I'm afraid to do it. I might be able to do it when there aren't people around, but I certainly couldn't do it in front of people. So you found out that information. Then the next thing to do is if your child says, I can't, I don't feel comfortable doing it. That's okay. Then it comes to, as your parent, I can tell this is bothering you and this really must be hard for you. Would you be willing to write down a couple of sentences for me? And I'd like to contact your teacher. And I'm not doing it because I want to get the other kid in trouble, because I believe you. The other kid may just be doing it as a joke because he thinks it's funny, but it's hurtful. And take it from there. And then I would let the teacher know that, my son, my daughter had a lot of reluctance about this. And I'm not calling to get this other kid in trouble. My son just wants it to stop. And then the way that it can be handled is somebody from school can say to that kid, somebody overheard you a couple of times call Kara short. In our school, we treat people with respect. So please use another word. Or, that's how you start the conversation. But I love the question because, again, it's that gray area. And but just because it's not bullying, it may just be real teasing, it still deserves a response.
Thank you, Kara. So this next question kind of piggybacks, I think, that scenario a little bit, but it says, what is the middle school and high school protocol for a parent or student who comes to you with concerns about being bullied? I think, very similar to what Kara said, we want to first, gather information about what is going on, how often is it happening, what's the impact on the student, and then obviously start to turn it into where, as administrators, I think sometimes people overlook, we're educators first and foremost. So we want to turn it into a social or emotional learning experience for the students. And using the example that you just spoke about, Kara, my experience is that sometimes students are not aware that it's impacting them in a negative way. And then when all of a sudden they say, wait a second, I wasn't, intending to be mean or hurtful to them. So that awareness and that approach, has been, I think, very productive with the students. Obviously, there could be other scenarios that occur with it, but, we use a multi-tiered approach. We are, as administrators, teachers, pupil personnel, guidance counselors, psychologists, we want to put a plan together that's going to try to alter that behavior and make the person who is, creating the action or saying something or doing something to understand that, again, we have a code of conduct, so there is an expectation about how behavior is supposed to go. But then there's also the social aspect of it, and making sure people are aware that, students particularly, that this isn't acceptable and it has to stop. So we've always tried to take that approach. And again, if there is, a call or a need for a consequence, an administrative consequence, then, that could be part of it as well. But I think it's trying to alter the behavior and trying to make students learn from that experience.
Yeah, Mr. Colasuno has joined us. Maybe he could talk about the health curriculum, what we do to prevent situations from even arising. You muted me, Andy, you muted.
Yeah, I don't hear you.
Well, yeah, anyway, in the middle school health curriculum, Andy was a health teacher, but basically, this is basically covered bullying, stereotyping, classifying students, why we do it, how to react to it, why it's not effective, how it hurts people. We also have opening assemblies at the middle school and high school to really, everybody's back from the summer. So, we're here to support the students and make sure they feel safe. And basically, if they want to come to an adult, we're here to support you. So, pupil services is very much involved, the counselors, our psychologist, Mrs. Sullivan, and we take it from there on opening day, follow with the health curriculum. And Mr. Calasano is also working with outside agencies to work with the GO to enforce it and make our program even better.
Thank you, Doc.
Sure.
That is it for questions at this time. So I'll give anyone a last opportunity to type in a question if they have a question they would like us to respond to.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And, this is not a only opportunity. Please feel free to reach out, email, us as well. Communicate with us, keep us in the loop. Where we get copies of the PowerPoint. Again, we will post it on the website. I will send out a Blackboard Connect once we have put that presentation as well as the resources up, just to let everybody know. So we will have it on our website though for everyone to be able to view and use. Kara was very graceful in allowing us to do that. Not everyone does, but she believes in the importance of this, so she is going to allow us to do that.
Any more questions? Well, I'd like to thank Kara and Ms. Santucci. Thank you very much. Mr. Bellis, for all your hard work in organizing. I'd like to thank our panel, Mr. Kilgallen, Mr. Calasano, Mr. Kehoe, and Mr. Cooper, who gave us technical support. We were able to get through it technically. And I'd like to thank the audience. If you have any follow-up questions, you have our emails. You can always call the office. And as Mr. DeBellis noted, this presentation will be on the website. So thank you, everybody, and have a nice evening. Thanks again, Mrs. Santucci. Great job.
You're welcome.
Thank
Good night,
you, everyone.
everyone.